The door to the bakery wouldn't budge, and Talia Jennings wasn't used to things not bending to her will. She frowned as she tugged again, harder this time, but the old wooden door stayed stuck in its frame. The winter air bit at her cheeks, and her heels weren't helping her balance. She glanced around the quiet street, hoping someone might be passing by. "Need a hand?" a deep voice called behind her. She turned and nearly stumbled. A man in a faded gray hoodie and worn jeans was crouched beside a toddler bundled in a puffy coat and bright pink mittens, holding a juice box in one hand and a torn plastic grocery bag in the other. His dark gold-brown hair was windswept, and his eyes were the kind that made people pause, warm, steady, and tired. "I think it's jammed," Talia said, stepping back. "I pulled, I pushed, it's just not moving." He handed the juice box to the little girl, then walked over. "Let me try." With one quick tug and a firm shoulder shove, the door creaked open. Talia blinked. "Okay, wow, thank you." He gave a small nod. "No problem, that door always sticks, especially in the cold." "You've been here before." He gestured toward the sidewalk. "I live down the block, my daughter loves their muffins." The toddler toddled over then, gripping her dad's leg. "Daddy, can we get one now?" "Sure, Maddy, you've earned it after that juice box standoff." Talia laughed before she could stop herself. "She's adorable." "Thanks," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Jace Dalton." "Talia," she replied, shaking it. She didn't offer her last name. Most people recognized Jennings, especially here in the city. He stepped back as she walked into the bakery, the little girl close behind. The warmth hit her instantly, along with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon. "Come on, Maddy. Let's pick something out," Jace said, lifting the girl gently into his arms. Talia stood at the counter, watching them for a moment. He wasn't wearing anything designer. His sneakers were scuffed and his coat had a repaired tear near the zipper, but he held his daughter like she was the most valuable thing in the world. The barista called her name and handed over her custom latte with the kind of smile that meant she'd been recognized. Talia gave a quick nod, then glanced back at Jace and his daughter at the pastry case. "Muffin or cookie?" he asked the little girl. "Chocolate," Maddy said with wide eyes. Jace smiled at the barista. "One chocolate chip muffin, please." Talia stepped forward before he could reach into his wallet. "Add it to mine." He blinked. "What?" "I insist," she said, handing over her card. "You helped me with the door. Consider it a muffin of appreciation." He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know," she smiled warmly, "but I want to." He studied her for a second, then nodded. "All right, thank you." They stood side by side waiting for their order. Maddy was already nibbling her muffin when Talia glanced down. "I didn't mean to pry," she said softly, "but are you all right?" Jace looked up. "Yeah, just a rough patch, nothing we can't handle." Talia didn't push. She nodded and accepted her coffee, watching him tuck a napkin into Maddy's coat to keep crumbs from falling. "All right, kiddo," he said, lifting her again. "Time to go, can't be late for preschool." She glanced at the clock. "You've got 8 minutes and a long uphill walk." His grin was crooked. "I run fast." "Come on," she said on impulse. "I'll give you a ride." He blinked. "What?" "I'm heading that way anyway. I have a car." He hesitated. "We don't usually take rides from strangers." She bent slightly to Maddy's eye level. "Would it help if I promised I'm a good person and I have heated seats?" Maddy giggled. "Heated seats, Daddy." Jace sighed. "All right, but only because she's already sold." Talia led them to the curb, where her matte black SUV waited. The driver opened the door, and Jace's eyes widened slightly. "I thought you meant like, a car." "This is a car," she said with a wink. Inside, Maddy was buckled safely in the back, and Jace sat beside her, clearly trying not to gape at the leather seats and spacious cabin. "So," he said slowly, "what do you do, Talia?" "I consult," she said vaguely. He raised a brow. "Tech, finance?" "A little of both," she smiled. "And what about you?" He looked out the window. "I was a contractor, construction, but things dried up after the company I worked for shut down. I do side jobs now, fix stuff, paint, install light fixtures, whatever people need." She nodded. "That sounds like honest work." Jace glanced at her. "Doesn't always pay the bills, though." They pulled up in front of a small brick preschool. Maddy leaned forward, pressing sticky fingers to the window. "Bye, nice lady." Talia turned and grinned. "Bye, muffin girl." Jace stepped out with her, closing the door gently. "Thanks again, for the ride and the muffin." "Of course," she paused. "Can I ask you something?" He looked at her warily. "Sure." "Do you ever do door repairs?" He blinked. "Yeah, all the time." "My apartment building has about 6 that stick. Think you'd be interested." He studied her. "You don't seem like the type who lives somewhere with sticking doors." She shrugged. "Maybe I'm not what I seem." He chuckled. "All right, give me an address. I'll take a look tomorrow." She handed him a sleek business card, blank on the front except for her name and a number. He stared at it. No company name. "I don't advertise." He nodded slowly. "Okay." And then he turned and walked off, holding Maddy's hand tightly in his. Talia stood by the car, heart thudding for no good reason. She'd met 1,000 men in designer suits, some with yachts, others with private jets, but none of them had looked at their daughters the way Jace looked at his. And none of them had looked at her like she was just a woman with a stuck door. She got back in the SUV, still smiling. "Where to, Ms. Jennings?" her driver asked. She leaned back. "Home, and make sure someone picks up 6 new doors." Because she had a feeling, she wanted to see that man again. Talia didn't usually wait around for contractors. She had people who managed her properties, people who managed those people, and a calendar that rarely left room for anything unscheduled. But that morning, she was standing in the hallway of her downtown brownstone wearing jeans, a sweater she hadn't worn in years, and no makeup. She checked the time again. At exactly 9, a knock sounded 2 short taps, then one longer. She opened the door to find Jace standing there with a toolbox in one hand and Maddy on his opposite hip, bundled in a new coat several sizes too big. "Sorry," he said. "Preschool's closed for a staff day. She's tagging along." Talia stepped aside. "Well, I hope she likes elevators and old hinges." Maddy twisted to look at her. "Do you have juice?" "I have orange," Talia said, closing the door behind them, "and cookies, but only after supervising." Maddy nodded solemnly. "Supervisors get cookies." Jace looked at her as they walked down the hall. "You weren't joking about these doors." "They do what they want," she said, "like cranky old men." He crouched by the first door, testing the hinges with a quiet efficiency that told her he wasn't guessing. Maddy plopped down near the wall and pulled a coloring book from her tiny backpack. "You didn't mention this was your place," Jace said after a moment. "You didn't ask," she replied, watching the way his forearms tensed as he adjusted the frame. "You thought I lived in a building with sticky doors, remember?" He glanced up at her. "I thought maybe you were visiting someone, or maybe you had weird taste." "I do have weird taste," she said. "I like things that aren't perfect." He paused for a beat, then went back to work without comment. The silence was comfortable. Maddy hummed softly as she colored, and the sound of tools tapping lightly against wood filled the space. Talia knelt beside the little girl. "What are you drawing?" "A dragon, but it's nice." Does it breathe fire? No, Maddy said, flipping to another page. It makes pancakes. Talia laughed. That's a dragon I'd get along with. By noon, Jace had repaired all 6 doors. He wiped his hands on a cloth and stood, stretching out his back. They'll open smoother now. Might stick again in a few years if no one oils them, but they're good. She handed him a glass of water, which he took with a quiet thanks. You're fast, she said. I've had practice. You don't get to linger when you're doing jobs in people's homes. Do you always bring Maddy with you? Only when I have no other option. My sister usually helps, but she's out of town. Talia nodded. How much do I owe you? He hesitated. 300 covers it. She looked at him. That's generous. I'm not trying to bankrupt you, he said. No, she said, walking to the kitchen counter. But you should value your work. She returned with a check and handed it to him. He looked down. This says 1,000. It does, she said, watching his reaction, because that's what it's worth. I can't take this. You can, she said gently, and you will. Maddy tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, can we eat lunch now? Talia gestured toward the dining room. I made grilled cheese, not fancy, but enough for 3. Jace hesitated again, then followed her. They sat at the long oak table, Maddy perched on a booster seat as she dipped crusts into tomato soup. Jace was quiet at first, but eventually he relaxed, letting the warmth of the small meal pull him in. This place is beautiful, he said suddenly. Not just the building, the way it feels. Talia looked at him across the table. You mean it doesn't feel like a millionaire fortress? No, he said. It feels like someone lives here who doesn't need to be seen. She stopped, her spoon halfway to her mouth. That's oddly accurate. He took a sip of his water. I meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. After lunch, Maddy curled up with a blanket on the wide window seat near the radiator and promptly fell asleep. Jace stood quietly, watching her, then turned back to Talia. She doesn't get this kind of peace very often. Why not? I move us around a lot. Rent goes up, jobs shift. Try to shield her from it, but she notices more than I want her to. He leaned against the archway. I'm doing the best I can. I can see that, she said. There was a pause. You didn't tell me what kind of consultant you are, he said without looking at her. I work with startups, some tech, some medical. I help them scale, invest sometimes. He nodded. So you're the kind of person who builds empires. She stepped closer. Only if I believe in what I'm building. His brow furrowed slightly. I don't usually do this, she went on. Let strangers into my home, offer lunch, talk about dragons. I don't either, he said. Usually I finish a job and leave. No grilled cheese, no juice. She smiled. So this is uncharted territory for both of us. He looked at her, then really looked. There was something raw in his gaze, something unguarded. I can't give you what you're used to, he said quietly. I don't have a penthouse or a driver. I don't know wine pairings or what fork goes with what course. I already have all that, she said. What don't have is someone who sees me when I'm not performing. His eyes held hers. Would you let me see you again? She asked. He exhaled, slow and careful. What happens if I say yes? Then we figure it out, she said, one stuck door at a time. His mouth tugged into something close to a smile, not polished or rehearsed, but real. Okay, he said, let's see what happens. Talia stood in front of the mirror in her walk-in closet, holding up 2 different jackets. One was structured, tailored, and screamed boardroom. The other was softer, a little too casual for most of her calendar, but felt more like her lately. She chose the second one. When her driver pulled up to the small brick community center 10 minutes later, Talia climbed out without waiting for the door to be opened. She'd taken Jace at his word when he invited her to stop by if you're curious. He'd mentioned he volunteered there on weekends, helping with repairs and donating his time to local families. She didn't bring a checkbook or a press photographer, just herself. Inside, the center buzzed with children's voices and the clamor of folding chairs. The air smelled faintly of finger paint and reheated coffee. She spotted Jace near the back, crouched beside a broken shelving unit with a screwdriver in one hand and a small boy watching closely from the side. Talia waited until he'd finished adjusting the bracket before stepping forward. "I thought you said you didn't work weekends." Jace turned slightly, eyes lighting up with something surprised and unguarded. "Said I didn't take paid jobs on weekends. This doesn't count." "Does this place know how lucky they are?" He stood, brushing off his hands. "They get by, some weeks better than others." The little boy tugged Jace's sleeve. "Is she your girlfriend?" Jace let out a laugh. "Not yet." The boy grinned and ran off, clearly satisfied. Talia tilted her head. "Not yet." Jace shrugged. "He's 8, he sees the world in straight lines." She nodded toward the table of snack boxes. "Is Maddy here?" "Painting, she's in the art room with Gloria, my neighbor from down the hall, retired school teacher." Talia nodded. "I brought a few books, thought you might be able to use them here." "You brought books?" "Children's books, a few early readers and some classics. I had them boxed up in storage." He studied her for a moment. "Thank you. We don't get many donations unless someone's having a fundraiser." "I'm not fundraising," she said, "just listening." He stepped closer, voice softer. "You don't come here to be seen, do you?" "No," she said. "I came because you said I could." Jace looked away briefly, his jaw tight. "Most people only care when it gets them something. A headline, a tax write-off. You're not most people." "I never wanted to be," she said. They stood there, surrounded by chaos and color, but the moment between them was still. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't calculating her next move. Jace cleared his throat. "You want to help me fix a door? One of the hinges came loose." "I'm more of a moral support type." "You can hold the screws." She followed him down the hallway to a room with cracked linoleum floors and a mural half finished on one wall. The door hung slightly off its frame. Jace knelt again, sorting through a tin of mismatched hardware. "Some of these screws are older than me." "How long have you been coming here?" she asked. "Since Maddy was a baby. I needed a place with heat during the winter. They let us stay during open hours. I started fixing things so we wouldn't feel like dead weight. And now it's just part of our world," he said. "Maddy calls it our second home." Talia crouched beside him, careful not to knock over the tin. "You ever think about turning this into something bigger? A business, maybe?" "I've thought about it," he said, "but I don't know anything about building a brand or pitching an investor. Fix things, that's what I'm good at." She reached for one of the screws. "You're better at more than you think." He looked at her then, and the space between them shifted again, heavier now. Not with tension, but with possibilities neither of them had spoken aloud. Jace straightened. "You want to get out of here for a bit? Maddy's busy till 4, and I know a place with cinnamon rolls bigger than your head." Talia raised a brow. "You're asking me out." "I'm asking if you're hungry." "I could eat." They left a note with Gloria, who promised to keep Maddy entertained. Then Jace drove them in his truck an older model with a cracked dashboard and a radio that only played one station. He didn't apologize for it. He didn't explain it away. She liked that. The bakery was tucked between a laundromat and an auto shop. Inside, the windows fogged slightly from the warmth, and the scent of sugar and browned butter wrapped around them like an embrace. They sat at a small corner table, with chipped paint and half-drunk coffee rings. "So," Jace said, licking icing off his thumb, "what was your childhood like?" Talia blinked. "That's not small talk." "I don't do small talk, I do real." She took a bite of the roll. "Chaotic. My parents weren't around much. I learned early how to disappear in plain sight." "Must have made you good at observing people." "It made me good at surviving." He was quiet for a moment. "I was the opposite. My parents were always around, but not in ways that mattered. Everything was about appearances. My dad was a contractor too. He cared more about the neighbors' opinions than whether we had working heat." "Is that why you're doing this your way?" "Maybe, or maybe, just don't want Maddy to grow up thinking love is conditional." Talia leaned back, eyes soft. "She won't." "She already won't," he said, "because of you." Her breath hitched slightly. "What do you mean?" "You didn't have to come today. You didn't have to bring books, or sit on a dirty floor holding screws just to keep me company." "I didn't do it for her," she said. He met her gaze. "I know." The silence stretched again, but it wasn't awkward. It was full. Jace reached for his coat. "Come on, I want to show you something before we go back." They drove 5 minutes to a construction site surrounded by chain-link fencing. The building was mid-renovation, with scaffolding hugging its sides and piles of materials stacked neatly nearby. "This was supposed to be my big break," he said, leaning on the hood of his truck. "I designed the layout, pitched the remodel, but the investor pulled out when the economy dipped. The site's been frozen since spring." Talia stepped closer, peering through the fence. "It's beautiful. The bones are strong." "I still think it could be something. A co-op space for local tradespeople. A workshop downstairs, maybe a tutoring center upstairs." "Why haven't you found another investor?" He gave her a look. "Because I don't know the first thing about getting someone to believe in blueprints." She turned to him. "What if someone already did?" Jace's expression shifted. "You'd put money into this." "I'd put belief into it," she said. "The money's just a tool." He stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's partnership." He didn't answer right away. Then he reached out slowly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I've never met anyone like you," he said. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "That makes 2 of us." Then he kissed her. There was no fanfare, no audience, just the 2 of them, standing in front of a half-built dream, tasting cinnamon and hope on each other's lips. The wind had picked up by the time Talia stepped out of the SUV, tugging at the hem of her coat as she approached the edge of the construction site. The scaffolding still encased the building, but now tarps covered the upper floors, and fresh beams had been stacked neatly inside the fence line. It had only been 5 days since they stood here together, but it looked different now, less like a forgotten dream and more like something stirring to life. Jace was already there, clipboard in hand, talking with an older man in a reflective vest. He looked up when he saw her approaching, eyes narrowing against the wind. "You weren't supposed to come until this afternoon." "I redirected a meeting," she said. "Besides, I wanted to see it." Jace handed the clipboard to the man beside him, then walked over. "We broke ground on the 2nd floor framing this morning." Her gaze swept the space. "It's moving fast." "It has to," he said. "The colder it gets, the harder it'll be to keep the materials from warping. And I've got 10 people counting on this job to get them through the next 2 months." She pulled her gloves tighter. "I spoke to a friend of mine who manages community grants. She wants to come by next week. Says your project might qualify for a matching fund." Jace blinked. "You're already pulling strings." "I'm not pulling anything," she said. I'm opening doors, you're the one building them. He looked down, then back at her. You're not doing this just because of me, are you? No, I'm doing it because it makes sense, and because people like you deserve to win sometimes. He didn't argue. Instead, he looked toward the building again, his expression shifting into something unreadable. I've been thinking, he said after a moment, about what you said at the bakery, about partnership. Talia nodded. Go on. I've never been good at asking for help, he said, but you didn't wait for me to ask, you just showed up. That's what support looks like. He turned to face her fully, and I want to give it back. She tilted her head. What does that mean? It means don't want this to be temporary, he said. Not the building, not the project, not you. For a moment, the wind was the only sound. I know our lives don't match on paper, he continued. Mine's messy, yours is polished, but I've never felt more grounded than when I'm standing next to you. Talia's chest tightened. I've spent years creating a life that made sense on paper, but it never felt like mine until you walked into it. He took a step closer. This is going to sound insane. Try me. I want to build something bigger than this project, he said. I want a life with you in it. You and Maddy and everything we can create together. Her eyes shimmered. Are you asking me something? I'm saying I want to try, he said. For real, no safety nets. No pretending we're just helping each other out. Talia reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a folded sheet of paper. She handed it to him. He opened it, scanning quickly. What is this? A proposal, she said. Not the romantic kind, a business one. Filed a new LLC this morning, co-owned, 50-50, Dalton and Jennings Community Restoration. He looked up slowly. Are you serious? I want to fund it, you run it, she said. You hire who you want, set your own terms. I'll be your partner, not your boss. Jace stared at the paper. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she whispered. He folded the paper carefully, like it was fragile. Yes. She didn't wait, she reached for his face and kissed him, right there on the gravel path, with the sounds of hammers and wind and a future they were already shaping. Later that night, they returned to her brownstone. Gloria had offered to keep Maddy overnight, and for the first time, they had hours stretched before them without interruption. Talia poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Jace as he settled onto the couch, his shoulders still dusted faintly with sawdust. He took a sip, then looked around the room. I used to think homes like this were just walls with expensive furniture. And now it feels like a place where things begin. She smiled, curling her legs beneath her. I used to think love had to be complicated, high stakes, strategic. And now I think it's about showing up, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. So what happens next? We build, she said softly. We build something that lasts. They didn't need a rooftop dinner or a private island to seal what they already knew. A week later, they stood together in front of a packed room, contractors, volunteers, neighbors, and donors all gathered for the official ribbon cutting of the restored building. Maddy stood between them, her tiny hand gripping both of theirs. Jace gave a short speech that made the room laugh, then cry, then cheer. Talia didn't speak at all. She didn't need to. The way she looked at him said everything. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and the sun dipped behind the skyline, Jace turned to her. I never thought a stuck door would change my life. She looked up at him, eyes warm. It didn't. He raised a brow. You did, she said. You just needed someone to see it. And he did every day after that, with every project they launched. Every night they fell asleep with Maddy's laughter echoing down the hall. Every moment they chose each other again and again. Because some doors don't need to be forced open. Sometimes they just need the right person on the other side. The soft hum of jazz filtered through the open windows of the newly finished upstairs space, now a tutoring and mentorship center where sunlight poured in over polished wooden floors and freshly painted walls. Children's laughter echoed faintly from below, where a weekend workshop had just wrapped. Talia stood barefoot in the center of the room, her heels discarded at the door, watching as Jace adjusted a framed hand-drawn sign beside the door that read, Dalton and Jennings. She folded her arms. It's crooked. Jace stepped back, made a face, then tilted it slightly. Better. Barely. He exhaled, then looked over at her. You want to do it. I want to supervise. He grinned and stepped aside. Be my guest, boss. Talia approached, carefully lifted the bottom corner, and nudged the frame until it sat perfectly straight. She stepped back just as the building's front door opened downstairs and a familiar voice called up. Is it safe to come in, or are you two still arguing over decor? Talia laughed. Get up here, Leela. Her best friend appeared moments later, carrying a portfolio case and 2 iced coffees. She handed one to Talia and gave Jace a once-over. You look like a man who's been kept up by a 3-year-old and a renovation schedule. I have, he said, accepting the coffee and sipping gratefully, but I'm still standing. Leela opened her case and pulled out a stack of documents. I've got the final contracts for city registration, the nonprofit arm paperwork, and the vendor agreements. Also, someone from the mayor's office is coming Tuesday. Jace blinked. The mayor. Talia took the papers, flipping through. They want a photo op, but they'll also bring press. It'll help the next phase. He scrubbed a hand through his hair. This is getting bigger than I ever imagined. That's what happens when you build from something real, Talia said. It resonates. Leela glanced between them. You know, it's wild. You've only known each other a few months, and yet you look like you've been standing side by side for a decade. Jace reached for Talia's hand. It doesn't feel fast, it feels inevitable. Talia smiled at him, her eyes warm. We were just waiting to find each other. Leela packed up her case. All right, lovebirds, I'm off to wrangle donors. You two keep being disgustingly perfect. As she left, Jace turned to Talia. You're really okay with all this? The visibility, the media stuff? I'm okay with whatever comes next, as long as it's ours, she said. I spent a long time building things that looked good on paper. This feels right. He touched her chin, lifting her face toward his. I meant it when I said I wanted a life with you, not just this project, you, all of you. I know, she whispered. I've been thinking about something, he said, his voice lower now. Something more permanent. She blinked, like a second location. He held her gaze, then reached into his back pocket. Not exactly. She went still as he pulled out a small, velvet box. You're not. Don't panic, he said quickly. It's not what you think, not a ring, not yet, but something just as real. She opened the box slowly. Inside was a key. Her brow furrowed. What is this? The key to the place I just signed the lease on. A little house. 2 bedrooms, backyard, close to the new site, close to here. Her eyes softened. You got a house. For us, he said. So you never have to choose between comfort and love again. So Maddy has space to grow, so we have somewhere that's ours. She swallowed hard. You want me to move in with you? I want us to build a home, together. She closed the box gently and looked up. Yes. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and certain. The building around them buzzed with life, but in that moment, it all fell away. That night, they packed up boxes from her brownstone and carried them down to the SUV. Maddy stood at the curb with her tiny backpack, clutching a stuffed dragon under one arm. Are we going to the new house now? She asked. Jace crouched beside her. We are, and guess what? You get to help pick the paint for your room. Maddy's eyes widened, pink sparkles. Talia laughed, only if they're on the ceiling. Maddy gasped and ran to the car, already imagining it. Jace loaded the last box and turned toward Talia. You ready? She looked back at the brownstone. It was a good chapter. And now we start the best one. They drove to the house with the windows cracked and music playing, Maddy singing softly in the backseat. When they arrived, twilight bathed the small home in golden light, and the porch light flickered on as they pulled into the drive. Inside, the walls were bare, the floors freshly cleaned, and the air smelled like new beginnings. Talia wandered through the rooms, touching the smooth counters and empty bookshelves. This wasn't a penthouse. It didn't have marble or gold fixtures, but it felt full in a way nothing else ever had. Jace joined her in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I was thinking we could put a big table here, one that fits everyone. She leaned back into him. I love that. And maybe a porch swing, for late nights. Yes. And weddings, someday. She turned in his arms. Are you proposing again? Not yet, he said, but I'm getting closer. She kissed him, slow and deep, and when they broke apart, she whispered, When you do, I'll say yes. The house echoed with the sound of Maddy's footsteps as she explored her new room. Later, they sat together on the living room floor, candles flickering around them and takeout containers open between them. Maddy had fallen asleep on a pile of cushions, her dragon tucked under her chin. Jace reached for Talia's hand. We built this. She nodded, and we'll keep building. Together, they watched the stars appear through the open window, the night wrapping around them like a promise. Everything that had once felt uncertain now felt beautifully, irrevocably complete. And in that quiet, perfect moment, they both knew. They hadn't just fallen in love. They'd created something stronger. A life that was entirely, irrevocably theirs.